Okay, so we thought we'd do another little chat, and we've got something a little bit different today. So we've been talking to a whole range of professionals about lots of different things. So we're talking to our mummy today, someone very special to me. She's our granny Mhairi, my stepmum for many years. And welcome.
Hello. Thank you.
And we're going to be talking about my stepbrother Alister, who we know as Pash, because somebody's written a little book about him based on his life. And Alister had type 1 diabetes, and Alister died at the age of 23 due to complications. He died of his diabetes.
He died.
He was unwell.
Yeah, a tummy bug gave him diabetic ketoacidosis.
Yeah, and that's why I let you say that word and not me. So we are going to be talking about Alister, who died, and that's obviously might be a little bit uncomfortable for people. And we are quite direct about the language we use about it, because you're very passionate about the language we use about your son who died.
Yes, he died. I didn't lose him. As I always say, I lost him in the Science Museum when he was 5.
Yes.
No,
and he didn't pass anywhere. We didn't pass him in the street.
No, not at all.
Okay. So really, what's happened is, the reason we thought we'd have a bit of a chat about this is that one of Alister's friends, Crinea, she is an author in her own right, but she's written this story. It's called Pash and the Blue Bicycle, and it is based on Alister. It's abstract in some areas, with some science around diabetes and some understanding of a family impact, and an abstract to look at the emotional impact on Alister himself.
Yep.
And that's obviously led to quite a lot of discussion around type 1 within us. It's obviously something that we've talked about at length over the years.
Many times.
Yeah, but from a professional perspective, from two angles, is as a older stepsister, to be fair, he was more like a step sibling of my child, and because you and I were more of a similar age.
We were, yes.
Yeah, and actually, as a much younger mother, understanding Alister's type 1 diabetes was not something that we didn't have a huge amount of information.
No.
And we certainly didn't understand the emotional impact, or the impact that had. What I do remember is probably not being very supportive on family holidays, when he was being an absolute stubborn toe rag and would not take an injection, or would not do what you'd asked him to do, or would not be helpful in any way. You know, sometimes it affected family meals, and sometimes it affected how you were enjoying your holiday, and it would irritate the girls. So then there was, you know, there was impact on them, and my dad would get the ump, and you know, sometimes it was hard work, and I don't think necessarily I had any understanding of how I would see it now. But do you think you were even remotely equipped at that age to have a grasp of what's going on?
What, as a child at 12? No, he wouldn't have. And as a parent, definitely not. It's very, very difficult. And yeah, it's how can you put how you can deal with a child that just doesn't want to be diabetic today?
Yeah.
Which often was the saying I had.
Yeah. And it's so what looked to me, even I remember, you know, I was a mum in my 30s, and he looked like he was being deliberately difficult a lot of the time, and it looked like that to you. It looked like that. We'd have conversations, sometimes there'd be falling outs within the family, then we'd talk about it properly, and it was a frustrating period. And he was such a lovely, you know, he was such a lovely kid. You know, it wasn't that I thought it wasn't that anybody thought he was not that great kids. It's just that the behaviour didn't go with what we do.
It was never as if he was being naughty.
No.
It just, he came across as being very uncomfortable. It was mainly injections. We had a real problem with him doing injections and him allowing me to do the injection, even though he knew he had to have it. And I think he was just very uncomfortable. And I suppose he was scared that this time might just hurt.
Yeah.
Which on occasions they do. And having to look at his mother's face, who's also very scared in doing it, must have made it 10 times worse for him.
Yeah, and I can't, not having had that experience, it's not something I would want. As I've got older, I have come across cases with children with type 1 diabetes where there are behavioural issues. So that has sort of led to that sort of looking into. There's a lot more science out there now around how the insulin is affected and the impact that has on the brain patterns, the neural patterns, and their emotional responses.
Yeah, that's something I don't know anything about. But
and we didn't have a clue, did we?
No, not at all. Not at all. The only way I can put it across is knowing my child and knowing children and being a mother. Oh, are you back again?
Yeah, you're back.
I'm back. I'm just going to have to. This is embarrassing. I'm low on power.
That's all right. You can prop yourself up somewhere.
I have done that now. Yeah, just by being a mum and trying to understand their own child's emotions when not really understanding what diabetes means. When you're a child, you must not know what's really going on with yourself. It must be very difficult having it as an adult, but as a child, it must be very scary. And only just trying to empathise with somebody with having it.
So Alister was 12?
Yes, he was 12.
When he was diagnosed. And the diabetes.co.uk have a whole piece on puberty and diabetes and how the sugar and the insulin, it works completely differently. And they lose a lot of the ability to self-regulate.
Yeah, in his mid-teens, we had a lot of times when he was very up and down. And some days things would work and other days it would just be all over the place. But then again, with a child, when they're going through that period of time, their eating's all over the place, which doesn't help with diabetes really. It's better if you can have very sort of more regularised anyway. Whereas in the teens, one day they eat like a child and the next day they eat like a full-grown adult.
Yes.
So yeah, everything, and plus the hormones make a difference. This is going to sound strange. Thankfully, it wasn't a girl because you have even more problems if it's a girl.
Right. Okay.
With the hormones.
Yeah.
Which will make a big difference.
Yeah, and it's and I think people are becoming more aware of it, but I think sometimes it's an uncomfortable conversation to have because it's a frightening condition for your child to have.
Yes.
And as a mother whose child died, the reality of the most extreme scenarios is that young people do die of conditions related, and it is fairly rare in that age group, but it is a possibility.
It is, yeah. I mean, from the moment he was diagnosed with diabetes, it was always in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
Always thought it was just a mother instinct. Didn't really think it would really ever happen because it doesn't. But diabetes in itself is it's very easy to control but it's very difficult to control. It's like walking a tightrope, or more like being on a seesaw, where just a tiny bit can set you off, but not much. You don't often need to do much to put it back, but it's that seesaw effect. It's very, very difficult.
And it's getting that balance right.
Yes, very much so.
And actually, I hadn't even considered, even with the work I do, and I'm really trying to educate myself more. Every client I have that has this, I try and learn a little bit more. But I hadn't even considered the amounts that would change through adolescence of what they're eating.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially boys are the worst for their eating. I mean, there were days, honestly, there was days when he would not want to stop eating.
Yeah.
I
remember the pasta days, the steak and pasta days.
Yeah. Pasta's not a good thing to be eating.
He did like lots of pasta though, didn't he?
He liked lots of food.
Yeah.
He did like his food. But,
he did. And it didn't let him hold him back. So when I said at the beginning that Alister had diabetes, he was really, really passionate about not using the phrase Alister is a diabetic.
Oh God, no. He would, if I ever did come out with that phrase, it does not define who I am.
Yeah.
I have diabetes. I am a chef. I'm a cyclist. I fly kites. I run. Anything else but a diabetic.
Yeah. And he was very active, wasn't he? So when you say he flies kites, he actually also did the kite surfing. Is that what you call it?
No, he had a buggy.
Buggying, right, okay.
Yeah. When I'm talking about flying a kite, I'm not talking about
Dick Van Dyke and Mary Poppins.
I'm talking about a 3 metre, 5 metre power kite that has enough power behind it that when you sit in these little buggies, it drags you along at a rate of knots that is, as a mother to watch, is exceptionally scary. And he ran, he cycled, he off-road mountain biking type biking, and he was also training to do on a road bike to do a duathlon.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So one of the charities you're very passionate about is medical detection dogs for diabetes, and I'll put the link up.
Exceptionally passionate. It was a charity that Alister found not long before he died. It was actually, they showed a dog on crufts, and that's where it all came from.
They're just a little charity, aren't they? They're not like, my husband's blind, we've got a guide dog, so I'm all about using animals as a supportive strategy, but they're not like guide dogs. They've not got this massive sort of public face. No,
they are beginning to go off a slight tangent. They're a medical detection dog, so they also are used to detect things like cancers, but they're also beginning to train them to detect COVID, believe it or not.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. I've just looked on the
and I hope
website.
Yes.
Cancers and other diseases. That's fascinating, because I've actually seen dogs that can detect epilepsy as well.
Yep, they use them for that as well, and diabetes, and quite a few other conditions where you can go up and down. Anxiety, major anxieties as well, they use them for.
Cool. I should get 3.
So, yeah, 1 each.
Yeah. So from my perspective, it's the thing that interests me from a psychological perspective with these young people with diabetes, and I've seen it at lots of different ages, is how the behaviour is sometimes affected around how they control their environment, and how that can look like behaviour in schools. I might get a referral, so and so and so and so being deliberately difficult, creating situations where they don't want to do something, being rude to staff, and the type 1 diabetes won't even be on it, the referral. It won't necessarily be something that's considered. until you start to have the initial conversations, and then that always makes perfect sense to me, because if you are given something that you have no control over, then a way to keep yourself safe is to find a way to manage that. And unfortunately, and it's well documented on diabetes.uk, and there's some American papers, how their psychosocial behaviour becomes maladapted, and it becomes adapted in ways that aren't helpful. So you might think like eating disorders, controlling your insulin, what you look like, whether you are or are not going to eat your snack box at school in one day, whether you are or are not going to be rude to that teacher, or not help being rude to that teacher. It's very, very hard, even if you know what you're looking for, to tell the difference between them manipulating you and genuinely struggling to manage their behaviour because of an insulin issue.
Yeah, because if a child, or if anybody, is low, they can become so awkward and so very rude. And for my child, who was so very passive, they can become physically aggressive.
Yeah.
And I've known it myself. And they do learn how to use their diabetes to manipulate situations. I found out after he died that he used it to get out of lessons at school, and also he would get a friend out of lessons at school, because if he was low he couldn't leave the class on his own, so a friend would go too. But on the reverse side of it, he would also use his diabetes to try to get around me, to allow him to do things which I felt nobody should be doing on their own. Because he was very active, there was a lot of things he'd wanted to do, asked if he could do, and I would say no, and it would always come back, it's because of my diabetes. So he would use that in a way to get what he wanted, not overly in a negative way, but they do learn to manipulate with it. And children can be awkward just to be awkward because they're struggling with everything. They can be awkward just because they want to be awkward, or again, high or low can make things very difficult for them as well as, and to be able to pinpoint the difference maybe each time a situation turns up is, well, it's like walking a minefield.
Yes, it's like trying to harness fog, isn't it? It's trying to pick like which one is the one that you're going to put your money on. It's you really just got to pick one and go with it, I suppose, until you feel differently.
You do it, and as I say, it's different every time, and you've got to try and weigh up that situation to see what it is that they're wanting out of it, or if they are actually poorly.
Do you think that level of control and manipulation made you more cautious as a mum with stuff you wanted to do?
Well, I was always more cautious because of the stuff he wanted to do was big stuff. I mean,
he was a very adventurous boy.
He wanted to walk along some marshes on his own. Now, I wouldn't allow anybody to do that on their own, but his thing was, it's because I'm diabetic. So, I think in a lot of ways I was quite lucky with him, or I didn't notice that he was manipulating me. Not sure which way it is.
I'm not sure I want to make an opinion on camera.
No, neither do I really, because I'm sure it could be. I'm sure he manipulated me at times when I didn't know I was.
Look, my child's a master at it, so I'm not sort of casting any judgment here. So. So one of the pictures I really like in this little book is, so it is loosely based on Alister. There's, she sort of looks at the age a little bit younger, I think, to give an understanding. There's some quite nice images of the discussions with the doctor. So I really like that image, and I know he was older, but also the fact that there's this sort of impact on the whole family.
Yeah, there was a big impact.
Because you do have an Amy who didn't die.
I do have an Amy who is very much still with us, and a lovely young lady. And
yeah, she's great.
As far as I'm aware, it's not scarred her for life. No. Having the brother that had diabetes.
No.
But yes, it did stop us doing a lot, and Alister would use I need to eat to get out shopping and things. So yeah, there was an impact on Amy as well as Alister and myself.
Yeah. I'd forgotten the I need a wee or I need to eat. I'd forgotten that. You saying that then just brought a little on holidays. And
yes, definitely. If he was bored with what he was doing, there was often I don't feel right, I need to eat.
Yeah.
And unfortunately you had to stop whatever you were doing.
Yeah, because how can you prove that? You know, the one time you don't do it, they genuinely then are very poorly afterwards. And then as a mum, that's a responsibility you don't really want.
Precisely. I mean, there were times when he was poorly and he hadn't noticed himself, and I had to say, look, I think it's time we ate. Yeah. But it was used a lot.
Bless him.
Right up into adulthood, even.
To be fair, I'd have manipulated it till the cows come home if I'd had anything like that. That I know my tendency to use things to avoid.
Yeah.
You know, if you're naturally avoidant, and I do avoid things, so I can understand how, you know, that would have been a nice get out clause, especially for social things, or, you know, things where it got a bit noisy or a bit busy.
Yeah, it's easy to walk away from, because, I mean, thankfully, I don't think he was too uncomfortable in social situations. So I don't think it was used that often with social situations. But I can imagine a lot of children would use it.
Yeah.
Because it's something that's very easy to use. And I can well imagine the injecting side of it could be used to get out. But although I do believe that they're using a lot more, I tried to think what they're called, levers, I think they're called. They're like monitors, the discs and things.
And they're like a pump, aren't they? They've got pumps, and then they're like discs that are just attached to things. Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been a marvel for Alister, I think. But then again, in his job, maybe not, because of yeah.
And it's, do you know, I mean, where we've come from with Alister, I mean, you know, he's been dead for a few years now, and he would have been 28 this year.
29 this year.
He would have been 29 this year. So we're going 17 years ago, and it was the old-fashioned injections, wasn't it? And you know, the early pens were the slightly bigger needles probably than they have now.
Yes, it wasn't too bad, to be honest. We did have to learn with proper needles. That's what we were taught to, with the syringes and drawing up the insulin. We had to learn that to start with, but then it was pens.
Yeah.
But the constant monitoring, I think, would have been a great help to Alister.
And what they do have now is that they do have their own therapeutic provisions for the kids, you know, in terms of managing emotional stuff. I mean, what I'm finding is the ones that are more ingrained in alternative ways of controlling their environment to feel in charge of their lives, they don't want to go to the therapeutic service, and they don't want the help. So
they do what they're doing.
100%, you know, that then sort of removes any barriers that they can use to feel in charge. So we tend to then work about what the behaviour looks like, with the agreement that we don't bring the diabetes into it at all. We just look at why we might want to, you know, do those things. which is sometimes helpful. And I'm by no means any expert on diabetes at all. I occasionally get clients who are not accessing anything else, and their behaviour is impacting on their education. So it's really something I'm sort of learning as I go along. So certainly not from any clinical point of view.
Yeah, I mean, as a mother, I can understand why a child wouldn't want to always have their diabetes the centre of everything they do. So going for help, I can so understand why a child wouldn't want that to be the centre of everything, because that's their whole life. Basically virtually every minute of their day is diabetes. The one thing Pash used to really say about diabetes was the constant smell of insulin.
Right, okay.
It was always there on his fingers. He just felt that it was just there on his skin, on his clothes. So yeah, that constant reminder that they always have of being, or having, I should say, diabetes. Going for some kind of help, I can so understand why they don't want it to be the centre.
Yeah. So it magnifies it again.
It does. It makes it the thing, thing, always the thing.
And Alister was very passionate about not being classed as someone with a thing, or that he was a thing. You know, it was part of his life, but he wasn't that thing.
No, not at all. No. And I think I helped encourage that. And I think that's what perhaps doesn't help children, because they're always termed as they're the diabetic child. I mean, I remember talking to one of Alister's employees after he had been in hospital one time, and they turned around and told me that he wasn't healthy. And I said, no, I don't agree with you, because his diabetes didn't make him unhealthy. He was a very fit and strong young man.
Yes.
And just because he had diabetes didn't take away from that health. But it's just so much people want to label them all the time, and it's not fair on children, especially I suppose when they're first diagnosed, and then teenage years are horrendous anyway for them. Apart from having to have that label stuck on you, oh, that's the diabetic child.
Yeah. And I think schools are getting better at, you know, about it being managed in a subtle way. You know, and certainly all schools have their own health plans and systems in place to monitor that. But I find that whole area of how the behaviour is impacted really interesting, because do you know what? If we've got children who have experienced trauma, we're getting very good at understanding the impact of that.
Yes.
And yet I don't think we're quite there yet, understanding how having a condition diagnosed that is lifelong, and with the impact that it has with diabetes, how traumatic that is, and the impact that has on a young person, on anyone of any age, but particularly through in childhood or adolescence.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, at the time, I was caught up with trying to be a mum, trying to help a child deal with,
of course,
without considering how he must have been feeling at the time so much, because it wasn't taught to me. It wasn't discussed. And basically, especially in the beginning, you don't have time. As a parent, there is so much you have to immediately learn about how to feed this child that you've already been feeding for 12 years. But immediately I spent 4 hours going around the supermarket trying to find food for him. So you don't have that time or your own emotions settled to deal with the child's emotions. So I'm really glad that it's beginning to be looked at, because I can't imagine.
I think, in all fairness, 17 years ago, we weren't having the understanding conversations we're having about emotional health and how the brain responds to these things then.
No.
That would still have been, that would still very much have been Alister's being really naughty with his diabetes. That still would have been that type of conversation.
Yeah. I never found him. I mean, as I say, I feel that I was quite lucky with him because he didn't particularly rebel against it.
No.
Apart from not wanting to have his injection, or not. I'm saying not allowing me to do his injections. I mean, I had to do them for 3 years, which is a long, long time.
Yeah.
Longer than really should have gone on. But as a parent, you're too scared to just tell your child get on and do it, otherwise you're going to be ill.
And I think also pre-diabetes, he could be stubborn now and again.
Oh yeah.
So I think I think the furthest we got to try and understand his emotions was always a stubborn little toe rag.
Yeah.
And then Mhairi will deal with it while we go off and sulk because we can't do what we're supposed to be doing. So I'm not sure that things weren't as evolved in terms of the sort of conversations we would be having, or
no, they definitely weren't. And I'll be honest, I'm quite an old-fashioned mum. Children do what they're told. And Randy's laughing because she knows that's what I'm like. Yes,
we won't go into how many arguments we've had over the years over parenting, will we?
No. But I have 2 wonderful children, the same as you have a wonderful child. So perhaps there isn't a right and a wrong way.
I think between the two of us, we've probably covered all angles, even with a few battles.
Yeah. So, yeah, children should do as they're told to a degree. I have always considered my children's feelings. I'm not that much of an old black. But the thought of how Alister was coping with it, with the injection side of it and why he wouldn't let me, was just as frustrating for him as it was for me. It was a very awkward time for both of us, I think.
And I think awkward's probably a really good word, because I think awkward is how these children come across.
Yes.
That would be my primary word. If people are describing these children to me, awkward would probably be the primary word. And if you're looking at avoiding controlling behaviour and a little bit of manipulation, that is what you see. You see an awkward entity in front of you, trying to completely get control of something that is completely out of their control.
Very much so. Yeah, I do agree with you. Pash wasn't one to talk about emotions, never. It wasn't, I didn't talk about them, because with Amy we did, but with Pash, it was more facts and everything. So to find out how he really felt wasn't easy. No. It was more of a just try different things and be as supportive as I could be of whatever he was trying to do for himself. I do feel that a child needs to own their diabetes, because they've got to live with it forever. So the earlier in their diagnosis that they learn to own it themselves and know that it's theirs, it's not mum's to look after.
Yeah.
Mum's there to support. I mean, Pash, right from the beginning, I had him, he took it on himself to organise all his paraphernalia, basically. Yeah. But I think that is something that perhaps is a good thing, that they own it, and they're allowed to own it, because maybe in a way that does give them a bit more control, rather than mum doing it all, or dad, sorry.
Yeah, I think that is promoted, actually. I don't know enough.
No.
but I get the impression that that is encouraged nowadays.
Mm. I mean, I don't know. We didn't socialise with other children with diabetes because Alister didn't. A lot of them were mollycoddled, wouldn't do outdoor activities, wanted to be sat in front of a computer.
Yeah.
That wasn't Pash.
No.
At all. So he just was not interested in forming relationships with other children in that situation, which may have been helpful to him.
Because that would have made him a diabetic. Rather than having diabetes.
I don't think he did go to a group a few times, but they were all of mothers that mollycoddled them, and he went to an outdoor activity centre, Arethusa, for a day.
Yeah.
And he said most of the children didn't want to join in. Whereas Alister, he'd been there with the school a couple of months before and had a whale of a time, and all he wanted to do was get on and do stuff.
Everything,
so it was very awkward. He found this a lot. He
didn't have a similar sort of peer group.
No, he didn't, no.
They were a more vulnerable mindset maybe in how they've managed it.
Precisely, yeah. Which again is something that needs to be considered, that not all people with diabetes are the same. Not all children with diabetes are the same.
No, exactly. Well, I mean, we know from, the amount of neurons that we have in the brain that there's just no way we're ever going to be the same as anybody else, with or without labels or labels that are placed upon us or conditions. But no, he certainly made sure that his individuality stayed firm, I think. And I think that's probably the thing that is his proudest achievement, is that he absolutely didn't compromise his life for that at all.
In a way, I actually think it pushed him more forward.
Okay.
Determined to prove that he could do what he wanted to do, despite it.
Yes. Yeah. Which is a control mechanism still.
Well, yes, which is very true. Yeah, another one.
But it's a positive driver as well. So, none of these things are negative. They just are. No. And it's, it's how we understand it and how we sort of cope with that.
Yeah.
So this book, she does go on to talk about Alister dying. She doesn't use those words specifically, and that's where we get the abstract. Is that because she talks about the relationship with his bike, and he was a prolific cyclist and a prolific bike collector.
Yes.
And then the bike obviously understands the unspoken emotion that Alister feels, and she uses the bike to represent that part, while the story tells the facts part, if you like, doesn't she? So,
yes, right.
Yeah. So, and then they go off on a cycle ride at the end, off to the greatest mountain, goddess of the sky, and he's having such a good time that they stay there.
Yeah, that was next adventure, or to Eric, which he was so
to his next journey.
And they spend their adventure always there.
Always, yeah. And how how perfect that, spend the rest of your eternity doing exactly what you want in the way you want to do it. It's just we're left missing them.
Yes.
Yeah.
But thankful that we had him.
Oh, 100%. Mhairi, thank you. It's to be able to talk so passionately about these things, as a mum whose child has died. I nearly said it.
Yes. Oh, I didn't lose him. I know where he is.
I know. We didn't lose him. But I think it's important, and obviously, this conversation is not meant to scare people, but hopefully maybe promote a different conversation with professionals about maybe how they look at children who behave in that way, or it might, you know, I do know a couple of people who are already going to watch it, that it, you know, it has already impacted through the very fact that they know about the book and they know I'm talking to you. So I'm sure just being able to see how you can have these conversations after, how you can use that in a positive way.
Well, I hope his life was very positive, and I hope his life can be used in a positive way. And thank you for letting me talk about my son, as I will talk to anybody about him.
And we will listen all day. You know we will.
I know.
All right, darling. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm going to put a link on to the book and to the medical detection dogs. And, you know, and also I think, you know, if you can possibly manage it, I know people are struggling with the lockdown, but, you know, maybe your organisations can get together and sponsor a medical detection dog. I don't want to take away from guide dogs because it's very passionate to us, but there's more than one sort of dog that's special.
They are. They're all special that help.
All right, darling. Thank you. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.